The art of letting go, finding peace beyond friendships. We spend much of our lives chasing connections, maintaining friendships, and seeking validation. But what if true peace comes not from holding on, but from letting go? As we age, priorities shift, and the constant need for companionship fades. Society glorifies busyness and social validation, making us believe that happiness depends on the number of people in our lives. However, Buddhist wisdom offers a different perspective. Fulfillment is found within, not through external validation. This is not about loneliness but about liberation, the kind that allows us to live more authentically, without the weight of unnecessary obligations. Here are 6 profound insights, inspired by Buddhist philosophy, on why friendships become less necessary after 70 and how letting go can lead to inner peace. 1. You no longer need to prove yourself. For most of our lives, we seek validation through careers, social status, and friendships. The desire to be seen, accepted, and respected often dictates our choices. But what happens when that need fades? When you no longer have to prove yourself, you unlock a new kind of freedom. Take Harold, for example. He spent his entire career climbing the corporate ladder, surrounded by colleagues he called friends. But when he retired, many of those relationships disappeared. At first, he tried to maintain them, reaching out, organizing gatherings, hoping to hold on to what once was. But soon, he realized why chase friendships built on convenience rather than genuine connection. Harold began embracing solitude. He pursued hobbies, practiced meditation, and most importantly, learned to enjoy his own company. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. But with time, he found peace in it. He was no longer seeking approval because he had discovered self-acceptance. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Harold finally understood what that meant. 2. Peace becomes more valuable than socializing. There is a Buddhist parable about a man carrying a heavy sack of stones. One day, the Buddha asks him why. The man replies, "Because I always have." The Buddha simply responds, "Then put it down." Friendships, like that sack of stones, can become burdens. Many people maintain relationships not because they bring joy but because they feel obligated. Take Margaret, for instance. In her younger years, her days were filled with social gatherings, parties, and endless phone calls. But over time, she realized something: many of these interactions left her drained rather than fulfilled. One evening, after yet another exhausting dinner filled with empty chatter, Margaret asked herself, "Am I truly enjoying this, or am I just going through the motions?" That night, she made a decision. She stopped forcing herself into social situations that didn't serve her. At first, the quiet felt unnatural. But soon, she discovered the beauty in it. She read books uninterrupted, took long walks in nature, and experienced a newfound clarity that had been missing for years. She realized that prioritizing her peace wasn't selfish, it was necessary. 3. Fewer friendships, fewer disappointments. Not all friendships are built to last. As we age, we experience betrayals, one-sided relationships, and friendships that fade. By the time we reach 70, we recognize that fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. William, now 78, learned this the hard way. He had spent years nurturing friendships, only to realize he was often the one making the effort. He would call, check in, offer support, but many of his so-called friends had moved on. At first, he felt hurt. But then he remembered a Buddhist teaching: let go, or be dragged. One day, he asked himself, am I valuing the quality of my friendships, or just their duration? Instead of chasing old connections, he started nurturing the few that truly mattered. He reconnected with an old neighbor who shared his love for gardening, spent time painting, and found joy in his own solitude. He realized that peace didn't come from having more people in his life, it came from being at peace with himself. 4. Your time becomes more precious. In youth, time feels abundant, and we spend it freely. But as we age, time becomes our most valuable resource. Richard, a man in his early 80s, once thrived on social events. But over time, long conversations felt exhausting, and gatherings became obligations rather than joys. One day, after yet another event filled with meaningless chatter, Richard made a decision: he would no longer waste time on things that didn't bring him joy. Instead, he focused on what truly enriched his life. He rekindled his passion for painting, spent mornings walking in the park, and embraced meditation. One evening, when a friend invited him to a dinner party, he paused. Instead of saying yes out of obligation, he politely declined. That night, he sat on his porch, sipping tea, watching the sky shift colors as the sun set. For the first time in years, he felt something profound: peace. The Buddha once said, "The trouble is, you think you have time." Richard realized that every moment should be spent with intention. 5. True companionship comes from within. Many people fear that letting go of friendships will lead to loneliness. But loneliness and solitude are not the same. Ilona, at 76, spent her life surrounded by people. Book clubs, dinner parties, endless invitations. Yet, despite always being in the company of others, she often felt a strange emptiness. One night, at yet another dinner gathering, she asked herself, "Am I truly enjoying this?" The honest answer was no. That night, she chose something radical: she embraced solitude. At first, it was uncomfortable. But slowly, she fell into a rhythm: morning walks where she noticed the way light filtered through the trees, afternoons spent painting without interruptions. Evenings immersed in books she never had time for. One afternoon, as she sipped tea on her porch, she realized something: she was at peace. She no longer maintained relationships out of fear of missing out. She had discovered that true companionship wasn't about how many people were in her life but about how comfortable she was with herself. 6. Letting go opens the door to true freedom. The greatest gift of aging is the ability to let go of expectations, of obligations, of the need to constantly perform for others. James, a man in his late 70s, spent years forcing himself to stay socially active, believing that staying busy equated to happiness. But one evening, at a crowded restaurant, he realized something: he was no longer enjoying it. That night, he made a bold decision: he would no longer force himself into friendships that felt hollow. He let go of the pressure to be everywhere, to be available for everyone. And something incredible happened: he felt free. His days became simpler, but richer. Mornings were spent in quiet reflection, afternoons in nature, evenings with a book in hand. He no longer needed an audience; he had become his own source of fulfillment. The Buddha taught, "You only lose what you cling to." When we stop clinging to friendships out of obligation, we create space for something greater: peace. Final thoughts: a life of inner peace. At 70 and beyond, friendships no longer define us. Instead, we step into a profound chapter of life, one centered on peace, self-awareness, and inner fulfillment. Remember, solitude is not loneliness. It is a sacred space where you rediscover who you truly are. And in that space, you may find that life becomes lighter, simpler, and more meaningful than ever before.